We are making this video for our friends who, like us, are always interested in how travelers manage from a wheelchair. The twist to our story is that Ed uses a hand cycle attachment for his wheelchair, which makes mobility much easier and faster than a wheelchair by itself. In this video, we describe our travel experience with the attachable hand cycle and wheelchair on airplanes, trains, and taxis.
I have been a fan of the Dragonfly, an attachable hand cycle manufactured by Rio Mobility in San Francisco, California, since I purchased my first one over 7 years ago. With extended use, I've discovered just how valuable an attachable can be. I use mine everywhere: stores, the park, bicycle trails, hotels, and even in restaurants. And I've never encountered a negative reaction to my having the hand cycle attached. Quite the contrary, many are intrigued by the obvious advantages. The Dragonfly is especially useful for travel because of its small 12-inch wheel and 8-gear internal hub.
In October 2017, we embarked on a long-awaited vacation to our nation's capital. We have been wanting to take in some of the new museums along the Smithsonian Mall and to visit New York City by train and take in the sights in Washington, D.C.
My experiment on this trip was to see just how easy it all would be to navigate air, train, and taxi travel using a hand cycle attachment. By the way, I have no commercial connection related to hand cycle sales or promotion.
Air travel accessibility has improved over the years, and FAA rules have been modified to permit travelers to use their mobility aids right up to the boarding location. Airlines, in turn, are required to stow the devices on board or in the baggage compartment when there isn't enough space on board.
In my case, I've always been able to take my wheelchair to the boarding area, but I wanted to see how it would work when I added my attachable hand cycle. I flew a couple times before, when once I packed my hand cycle as baggage and then reassembled it in my room at my destination, and another time when I simply arrived at the jetway with my wheelchair and hand cycle attachment. Both methods worked, but bringing the hand cycle on board was the simplest and most convenient. It meant that I had my mobility aid to maneuver the air terminal and on arrival at my destination.
The first leg of this trip was a commuter flight from the small airport in Monterey, California to San Francisco International. For this flight, Ed was able to crank his hand cycle out to the aircraft, a Canada Air Regional Jet 200, as a jetway wasn't available for this small-size aircraft, where he transferred into an aisle chair and the crew loaded his wheelchair and hand cycle into the baggage compartment. The crew did attempt to stow the hand cycle on board, but it simply would not fit into any of the closets. We had a 3-hour layover in San Francisco, so it was really great for Ed to have his hand cycle brought up to the jetway when we deplaned. The ground crew brought on an aisle chair to help Ed off the plane, and then they assisted his transfer to his wheelchair. They were impressed when he attached his hand cycle and cranked into the terminal. Getting around in the airport was very, very fast, and the accessible restrooms were even large enough for Ed to keep the hand cycle attached during use.
When it came time to board our aircraft, a Boeing 757, for Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, I was again able to crank down the jetway and then transfer onto the aisle chair. While the ground crew assisted me to my seat, the other personnel took my wheelchair and hand cycle to the baggage compartment under the aircraft.
After the 5-hour flight, we deplaned at Washington National with no problems. Ed's wheelchair and hand cycle were waiting for him when the ground crew helped him off the plane using their standard small aisle chair. We located our luggage and headed to the taxi platform. After asking around, we were able to locate an accessible taxi.
The great thing about accessible taxis is the ramp that folds out the back of the vehicle. I was able to keep my bag on my backrest and my hand cycle attached as I loaded into the taxi. The driver applied the usual straps and anchors to my chair, and we were off to the hotel. Our taxi took us to the Capitol Holiday Inn, which is about a 15-minute ride from the airport and located near the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. The hotel accommodates wheelchair travelers extremely well. We enjoyed meeting a disability advocacy group there, and we were impressed by the accommodations they make for accessibility. I had a room with a wheel-in shower and plenty of open space in the room to wheel about.
Staying at the Holiday Inn Capitol near the Smithsonian Mall has many advantages. Their rates are reasonable, we didn't need a rental car, nor did we have to worry about parking or taxi fees. Ed was able to use his hand cycle to everywhere we wanted to go. We had a McDonald's and a Starbucks on our block for quick breakfasts when we wanted one. We also had access to the free Smithsonian Shuttle hourly service. The route around the mall takes 27 minutes with stops located at key destinations. The bus is wheelchair accessible.
The Washington, D.C. Metro is only a block from our hotel. From there, one can take many day trips to the various attractions throughout the metro area. The mall also has a bicycle sharing network that appeared to be fairly heavily used. We saw the bicycles everywhere.
All of the museums are readily wheelchair accessible. The mall trails are wide and flat, and we got to enjoy a great week of fall weather during our stay. It felt great to be outside with so many interesting places to visit. For the majority of the week, we just enjoyed all of the free museums along the mall, the great cafeterias in the museums, and the downtown eateries. Our pace was relaxed, and we absolutely enjoyed our nation's capital.
I grew up in a very small town in Wyoming. I guess that's why I have had a fascination for New York City.
To satisfy Ed's yearning, we decided on a one-day train adventure to New York City. We chose to take the 24-minute walk to Washington Union Station from our hotel. It was an easy walk. When we arrived at the station, we found the New York City line to the train and took our place. It wasn't long until an Amtrak porter came along and had us follow him to the elevator down to the trains. He then escorted us to our car, pulled up a ramp, and we entered with no issues. Ed was able to park his wheelchair and hand cycle near our seats. He had to take off his hand cycle just inside the door, as the passageway corners were too sharp for him to do it with the hand cycle attached.
We relaxed and enjoyed the scenery during the 3-hour ride. Once we arrived New York Penn Station, the conductor notified the station to prepare for a wheelchair egress even before the train came to a stop. We were met at the door by an Amtrak porter who helped set up the ramp and our exit.
The weather was perfect, the kind that comes during October. It was warm but not too hot. Since we were within walking distance of Times Square, we walked and hand-cycled the streets in that direction until we found an intriguing Irish bar. Since it was vacation time, we opted for a late morning beer and a clean restroom break.
Continuing onto Times Square, we noticed the many visitors in the streets, and we enjoyed picking out sites we recognized from TV and the movies. Times Square was quite the experience for this Wyoming-born and raised country guy. Animated, lit-up billboards were everywhere, and the streets were full of folks interacting with visitors with information and photo opportunities.
We finally worked our way to Central Park, and we picked up a more relaxed vibe. Family picnics, softball games, and other activities looked like the perfect way to enjoy a Sunday afternoon. Central Park is so large that we only took in a small part of it. It is more hilly than the street, so the accessibility was slower, but just as fun.
We spent the rest of the afternoon taking photos and just enjoying the city. Before we headed back to Penn Station, we found a great Jewish deli where we filled up on matzo ball soup, beet salad, and beer. Our day had been really fun, and now we were ready for the late-night train ride back to Washington Union Station. When we arrived at Washington Union Station, we could see the lines for taxis were long, and our chances of getting an accessible taxi would be slim. so I chose to ride my hand cycle back to the hotel while Nancy enjoyed a taxi ride. We met at the hotel entrance and managed to return to our room tired, yet thrilled to have enjoyed a great day.
Our return trip back to Monterey went pretty much as we had experienced on our trip out. The flight crews were very helpful when it came to helping Ed to board and to load his mobility aids onto the aircraft. We came home very pleased with the way everything worked out for us, promising each other that we will have to revisit and maybe spend a bit more time in New York City next time.
We hope you found our video helpful and that will inspire you to visit Washington, D.C., and maybe even use an attachable hand cycle while doing so.